Hello and good afternoon. You're listening to Atiyah on the Mental Health and Emotional Wellbeing Show on Ramadan Radio Wolverhampton, online on ramadanradiowolves.com. In the show today, we hope to provide information that may be helpful to support your well-being and the well-being of others, because everyone's mental health matters. Our guest in the last show gave an introduction to the Orange Wolverhampton campaign supporting the United Nations 16 Days of Action, saying no to violence against girls and women. Stephen Dodd, Councillor Jaspel and Councillor Core also provided information for help and support available in Wolverhampton. You can listen back to this on Ramadan Radio's YouTube channel, alongside finding further information, mental health information, on my Twitter feed at Atiyah Ali 3. We are not here to offer you any advice in place of your clinician. However, we will discuss information that may encourage you to seek support. If you feel you need to discuss your health and well-being following this show, then please do contact your GP. We won't be taking live calls within the show today. However, we welcome your comments via the WhatsApp messaging number on 07440 420 432. We are currently in another lockdown due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. We may notice that we are beginning to worry about this again, becoming more uncertain, more anxious about the current situation. It is important to try and find strategies to help us with this. In one of our previous shows, COVID-19 and self-care, we discussed this in further detail. Please listen back to this for further information on managing your well-being during this difficult time. In the show today, we have Dr. Ruxana Oshad, who is a clinical psychologist, and she will be talking to us about perinatal mental health. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oshad.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So you're a clinical psychologist and a systemic practitioner.
Yes, that's right.
Could you tell us a little bit about your role?
So I'm a clinical psychologist, having trained over a decade ago now, working in the NHS since about 2001, having a little break for private work a couple of years ago now. My current role is as a clinical psychologist, and I work in a perinatal service in the Midlands. And as a systemic practitioner, what that means is that I've completed the first 2 years of family therapy training. And so with appropriate association of family therapy supervision, I can work using a systemic or family therapy type model, as well as working as a clinical psychologist as well.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit about what is meant by perinatal mental health?
Yeah, sure. So perinatal mental health is really referring to the period of a pregnancy and the first year after birth. So it's thinking about the mental health and the well-being during a pregnancy and the first year after having a baby.
Right.
And really this impacts people who are of childbearing age, or thinking about expanding their family by having a baby. But perinatal mental health specifically is thinking about the common mental health problems that can occur during pregnancy, or for new or expectant mums. Up to 20% can experience a mental health problem in this period of time. And really what this has led to is some policy which is trying to focus on helping women who are in the perinatal period to be able to access support for their mental health when needed. And that started to expand now with the long-term plan, which is thinking about carers and fathers and family, the whole family, not just about the mum and the baby as a couple.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, especially the expansion of the work, because carers, fathers, and other family members tend to play significant roles in supporting an individual that going through the perinatal period. I'm just wondering, what kind of mental health problems do women experience during this time? You mentioned mental health difficulties.
Yeah, so there can be a wide range of problems that can be experienced, and again, it can be things. So we've all heard about postnatal depression. Well, this sort of depression can start antenatally as well, not just straight after the birth. So there's a depression. There's, I guess, there's heightened anxiety and perinatal OCD. So that can be linked to a health anxiety. It can be linked to intrusive thoughts, and the intrusive thoughts can be around cleanliness, or they can be intrusive thoughts about harm coming to the baby and feeling uncomfortable about that. There can be problems with bonding. So again, that can be antenatally, not feeling an attachment or a bond to the pregnancy, and in the critical period after birth as well. There's birth trauma, so that could be where there's been a previous birth trauma in a previous birth for the woman, or it can be that she's not had a baby but is very terrified of actually giving birth. And then there's psychosis as well, so something called postpartum psychosis, which it can occur in women who have never had a psychosis before as well, or they have got a family history of someone in their family close to them who have experienced a psychosis or a bipolar disorder. And so there is a development of a perinatal pathway in IAP services for the mild mental health problems. And then there is perinatal mental health teams that are in secondary services for the more moderate to severe end of the presenting problems that we can come across.
Right. So when you're talking about mild services and IAPT, that's increasing access to psychological therapies, and people will have this organisation in this service in many of the different areas, and then you're talking there about secondary services. So let's expand on that a little bit more in terms of the secondary services. But before we do that, could I ask you how people would recognise kind of the symptoms of someone who might be requiring more support?
Yeah, I guess it's thinking about when there is a feeling. So again, the baby blues is a common term that people may have heard, families might have heard about, women may have heard about from reading about preparing for pregnancy, and that's referring to sort of dip in mood or anxiety, irritability, that can last a couple of days really in the early period after birth. And what we're saying is that actually, if you find that it's prolonged, or it's very it's much more severe, or that there is some kind of manic or delusional element to your experience, then that's really indicating that there is something much more serious going on. So if you're feeling really down and it's more than a couple of days, it's more than a week or two, it's kind of lingering and lasting, then that's a sign that you need to get some support, some help, and get an assessment to see what's going on and where you can get support.
Yeah. Where could people get this assessment from? So if someone says they notice within themselves that they're feeling down for longer periods of time, as you've just mentioned, where would they seek support, and where would this assessment be done?
Sure. So really, you're thinking about the interfaces of where this could be picked up or where you could talk. So so that can either be your GP, it could be, if you're antenatal, it could be your community midwife. If you're postnatal, it could be your health visitor. But a lot of referrals we get in secondary care would come through the GP or through the midwife, who would would say, who would really, the referral would be that they've seen this person in their clinic or in their appointment, and then there've been these concerns, and that they would like an assessment to see. And then that assessment, I guess the need would be triaged about whether this fits more for a primary care IAPT perinatal pathway assessment, or whether it's more for, you know, the secondary perinatal community teams to assess and to look at support needs.
Right. So you're talking there about kind of the difference between mild, moderate, and severe experiences of the low mood or whatever the individual might be presenting with in terms of the mental health difficulty. I'm wondering, when you say assessment, what do you mean by that?
So I guess it would be thinking about the kind of the way that it's impacting mood, so that the kind of cognitions, the thoughts, you know, are there any thoughts of self-harm? You know, are there any thoughts around, you know, negative thoughts towards the baby or towards self, you know, the feelings and thoughts towards being a mother. You know, it might be thoughts of looking at if there's any, I guess, thinking particularly around the hopelessness. So I guess that's the first thing that we really want to look at. You know, the despair, the hopelessness, the depression. How deep does it go? Is the woman able to find ways of managing those moments? Do they last all day? How does it affect you know, things that she can do for herself, for the baby? Is she preparing for the baby? You know, is she attending appointments? Has she made all, you know, all the preparations, or is she really struggling to do any of that? So it's looking at the quality of the distress and how it impacts, and yeah, whether there are any thoughts of harm to herself or to anyone else as well. And I guess because I'm working in secondary services, that we tend to see that end of the spectrum. But really, I guess it's not about alarming families who might be listening. It's thinking about how to mobilize families to get what they need. So it's thinking about the impact on mum, the baby, the bond, you know, the dad or the partner, any siblings, any extended family, the community, and how that, you know, the woman can get what she needs to support her, and whether, you know, the symptoms are around a depression or you know, an anxiety, an OCD, or whether, like we were saying, there is something that's more bizarre in nature, that's, you know, some women can experience immediately after birth, or, you know, or sometime after birth, have a postpartum psychosis type experience. And in that case, it's really important to get help very fast from your GP.
Okay. I mean, the assessment process that you mentioned sounds very supportive, and trying to acknowledge kind of what direction the support would probably be provided in. I'm wondering, Dr. Ashad, if there are individuals who are experiencing more than the baby blues, let's say, and are feeling a little bit concerned about getting in touch because of myths like your baby will be taken or definitely taken away from you, or, you know, people will think I'm mad, and etc. How would you encourage them to say to seek support? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we find is that sometimes women do come late to services to get help because they find themselves struggling with this, either thinking it's just the baby blues, they'll get through, or it's not that bad, or that you know, they will find a way themselves, or they're really worried about being judged from services in that kind of way. I think the message is that there is support there to help, and services want you to get well, and to get what you need to help you to get through this, and really to support you and your bond with your baby, and to come through, because there is treatment, and that, you know, and treatment can, and the different interventions, they can really help. And sometimes that help really is there, and needs to be accessed, because especially right now in the pandemic, you know, resources are thin. There's a lot of pressure, you know, that everyone's experiencing and feeling. So the stigma and the barriers may feel really difficult, but I think it's about weighing up that the longer it's left, the more difficult it can either feel to get help, or the longer the symptoms, you know, are around. And so it really is better and easier to try and get support earlier on. However, I do want to say I think services have a responsibility to work with communities and to work with the families, to be responsive to what families actually want, so that they can help to be more accessible and more responsive as well. So what I mean by that is sometimes interventions may not feel like a good fit, especially if we're thinking about Black and Asian minority ethnic communities, who just may want things in a different way or with a different flavour. Some communities, for example, you know, may find talking about emotional and mental health easier when it's linked to spiritual health, and that just it can create an inroad. So I think services do have a responsibility to look at their local area, and to try and work out what the local needs are, what would be responsive, and how to make themselves more accessible to help with that as well.
Following on from that, I'm wondering whether so your services or services in the West Midlands do work closely with community groups to promote perinatal care.
So I guess I can't speak on behalf of the service that I work in, but I think there is a general move to work closely with peer support workers and people with lived experience to try and get an understanding of how interventions or services could become more accessible, or to learn from the things that were difficult. And so services are trying to make those connections and links, and I think different services may do that in different ways. And I think that some of the ideas that I've heard about, it's about trying to create, you know, regular forums where that lived experience voice can come in, and that's difficult though, because it's in a way there is power involved, and services do have the power and also have the funding to make changes. And peer support workers or you know, people with lived experience who offer their insights, they need to know how their views will be used and taken forward. So I think there are partnership groups at different levels in the service where views are taken in. There are consultations that occur, focus groups that occur, and there's research. So perinatal on the whole is a new area. So there's lots of research that is being taken up now, and I think all the different perinatal teams that are emerging across the country will want to be or are already involved in some kind of research. And I think particularly at the moment there is a big focus with the 5 times more campaign, which looks at how Black women are 5 times more likely to be impacted by either a birth trauma, or to die in childbirth, or experience neonatal loss, or have a very bad experience in childbirth. So the 5 times more campaign is raising awareness of this, and is encouraging maternity services, perinatal services to really think about how we're engaging Black communities, how are we engaging, you know, the Asian communities where these numbers are high, and how can we be responsive. So I think it feels like it's early days really, so I can't really comment on specific things, but that there is research that I think people are trying to get to work towards in answering some of these questions, and there are attempts to link in with peer support workers and lived experience. In terms of local communities, around the actual perinatal teams, I think that's going to vary patch by patch in terms of how much that linking up is happening. I think definitely the intention's there. How that's translated into action, I don't think I can comment on, but I'm hopeful that it's going to start moving in the right direction and start to impact.
Yeah, it does sound like it's heading that way, and there is increasing support for working and with Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities in terms of equity in access, and hopefully further supporting the perinatal care as well. I'm wondering, coming back to talking about the baby blues and let's say postnatal depression, which is probably better and the most commonly known. How could loved ones notice that there's an issue, and how could they broach the subject with their family member?
I think loved ones, if you start to notice really strong sort of negative beliefs about self, so if mum is starting to really put herself down, or really show lack of confidence, or doubt herself or her bond with her baby, there's sadness or despair, sort of hopelessness, or feelings of feeling trapped or estranged from the baby, or engaging in fewer activities, withdrawing, isolating herself. I think those things, really what you'll see is a real sort of dip and flat mood, or irritability underlying that. And I think it's about showing that you're there to listen, to gently just inquire, being curious, showing your love, support and presence, and starting to just open some conversations around, okay, well, how do I know when you need some support from me? What is it that I can do? Do you need some space right now, or shall we go for a walk, or should we try changing something in the home? And I think really the message is that if you're finding those kinds of thoughts and feelings and behaviors are lasting more than a week or two, and sort of really lingering on, it's about trying to have that conversation about maybe we should go to the GP and just see whether we can get some support, because you're not right, you're not feeling right. I can see there's something not right, and maybe there's something that we can do that can help. And I think that family support can help in helping mum to think about getting help and support.
Yeah. So the gentle acknowledgement and encouragement from family members might support an individual to seek further support. And from what you're saying, it's very welcoming in terms of the support that is provided. I'm guessing that in the first instance, if you were to speak to a midwife during your antenatal period, there would be support groups and other things available for women who are pregnant. I'm just thinking about the current situation and how that might be having an impact.
Of course, I think at the moment there is pressure in the system in lots of different ways, and there's very understandable stress about the situation. So I think families being as compassionate as they can, and understanding that your partner or new mum is feeling, she may be feeling ashamed of these feelings and thoughts, and being compassionate to help to dismantle that shame and say, no, it's okay, it's important that you look after yourself, and we work this through. In terms of services, so a lot of things are online. I think in terms of maternity care, it is different trusts will have different policies around different things. So I think probably the maternity hospital websites should, or will have some kind of update area on the website there may be a helpline where you can ring and find out up-to-date information about you know processes around COVID-19 and what they have to put in place for that. So although there has been a move towards trying to let partners in for scans, not all hospital trusts are following that, especially now that we are in a third lockdown. So there is a lot of understandable anxiety. However, I think what I want to say is that all maternity teams should have a specialist mental health midwife. So if the concerns are so great, you know, if mum's anxiety is really high and impacting, and she needs some support, then the mental health midwife, will be linked in, and then she can be helped to decide really about the birth plan and the package of care.
Okay, Dr. Ashad, sorry to cut you there. We will pick this up after the break.
Brilliant, thank you.
Welcome back. You're listening to Atiyah on Ramadan Radio Wolves in conversation with Dr. Ruxana Arshad with a focus on perinatal mental health. Before the break, we were discussing the third lockdown and the impact on perinatal care. And you were talking, Dr. Arshad, about specialist mental health midwives and kind of the differences that are in place now to cover this lockdown period. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think what I wanted to add was, so hopefully different maternity hospital websites will have a way of you know, becoming informed about what the differences are, what you know, and how that might impact you. You know, hopefully there will be some kind of helpline, and some maternity units are providing like a Zoom session, question and answers, or a Facebook Live to try and make themselves more accessible to answer some of those questions and concerns about what will my birth plan or my birth package look like now in these times of COVID as well. So it's hard to answer specifically, because different NHS trusts and different maternity hospitals will be differing in how they are managing this in particular. But what I was saying in terms of mental health is that there's a specialist mental health midwife. So if your community midwife can see that a mum is actually struggling in her mental health, and she will liaise with the mental health midwife, and then they will work out in terms of a referral pathway and where that needs to go to support the mental health of the woman as well. But we acknowledge that on the whole, at the moment, there is a lot of stress and anxiety about having a baby in the pandemic at the moment.
Yeah, and like you were saying earlier, that is understandable, and there is support available in terms of seeing women through the pregnancy and the perinatal period, and hopefully beyond if needed. Thank you for the information you've shared so far, Dr. Ashad. If you have just tuned in, I recommend you listen back to this show and do share it with friends and family. Dr. Ashad, I was wondering whether you were talking about secondary mental health services, and that you work in secondary mental health services. So you mentioned that there was kind of mild to moderate symptoms of perinatal mental health difficulties, if I've understood you correctly, and that when it comes to kind of a more severe presentation in mental health difficulties, then the woman is referred on to yourself or the secondary mental health services. Now, I'm wondering about psychosis during the perinatal period. You mentioned a little bit about it at the beginning. Can you mention a bit more about this and tell us a little more about this? Yeah, thank you.
So a small percentage of women can develop a postpartum psychosis. So what that means is that in the critical period after birth, they can start to suddenly experience either bizarre sort of thoughts or bizarre sort of behavior. And although there is a higher risk of this for women who have a family history of someone with a bipolar disorder, women with no mental health history can also experience this as well. So what we're talking about is having odd or bizarre thoughts, and these thoughts could involve thoughts of harm to self or even baby as well. It can be very serious. There can be hallucinations, so talking about seeing things which no one else can see, which come across as quite bizarre, and they can lack insight. So what that means is that they're not really aware that what they're seeing or experiencing, nobody else around them is seeing and experiencing as well. So they can have very fixed delusional beliefs in this time, and if these fixed or delusional beliefs involve the baby in some way, then that is really a red flag, and services need to be involved to help. And I guess that this is the sort of severe end or serious end of perinatal mental health problems, and
Right.
intervening early is really important. So I guess it's and sometimes family members, some of this may not be seen straight away if the woman is very, very withdrawn or very, very quiet and not sharing as well. So it really is important that if you see or feel that that mum is not feeling herself or behaving in a way that you would normally expect, that you have those conversations. If you're not sure, that you access some help as well. So I guess for secondary mental health, these are the sorts of situations which really we would want to try and risk assess to try and intervene as early as possible to help.
So when you're talking about hearing, did you say hearing voices and hallucinations, right?
Yes, that can be a part of it, yeah.
So when you're talking about hearing voices, it could be that initially an individual might think that, someone from the crowd or perhaps someone downstairs, and they weren't really hearing anything odd. Is it helpful to keep a diary or to notice when they're noticing kind of these things and the intrusive thoughts, and when they're becoming more kind of extreme?
I think it's difficult to say. I think when it comes to assessment, I think the best thing is really to involve a health professional that can come and really look at the overall situation. I think the message for families is that if something is seems it's like it's lingering, it's prolonged, it's severe and odd and unusual, to access help as soon as you can, really. So the GP, or if it's out of hours service, and then the professionals will make, I guess, that assessment about the quality of those thoughts and feelings and behaviours as well, and take it from there. So we don't want I guess women and families to get upset or worried about this, but it's just to try and raise awareness that there is a spectrum of difficulties that can be experienced in the perinatal period, and the more openness about discussing well-being at this time, and the range of difficulties. And I think the openness about talking about if there is a mental health history in your family, or if things did feel really, really difficult and bad, how would she like support to be to be put in place. And also I think the other thing as well is that partners and fathers can experience mental health difficulties in the perinatal period as well. So this is
I was going to come on to that a little later.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, Shad, sorry, about when it becomes this severe and you hear about kind of mother and baby units. Do you know anything about that? And I know that sometimes it triggers anxiety for people when they're thinking, you know, I'm going to be taken to this mother and baby unit and wondering what it's about. And I know that people won't necessarily be taken in or admitted or encouraged to be admitted.
I guess the mother and baby unit comes to attention really when perhaps the difficulties really feel unmanageable in the home environment, or there could be some intervention that could be accessed or assessment that could be accessed much better in the mother and baby unit environment to help with the overall care planning. And also, yes, where there is an acute postpartum psychosis, then either an outreach team or a mother and baby unit referral be made at that point as well. So in a mother and baby unit, I guess you have a multidisciplinary team, which would involve a consultant psychiatrist and psychiatry team, would involve most mother and baby units are attached with psychology, a psychologist or a psychology team as well, occupational therapist, nursery nurse, and have a creche so that the babies have an environment they can come and play and interact with as well. And I'm trying to think what else. So there's a multidisciplinary team, and they would help to support the different needs there. So often mother and baby units are trying to offer interventions like video interaction guidance, which is an intervention that helps with bonding between baby and mum. There are occupational therapists that would offer interventions around helping with, helping with just, doing activities, that create interest and joy again, as well as, maybe helping to see where mum feels less confident and helping to increase confidence there. And the nursery nurses would help with tasks around caring for the baby. There'll be, they can offer baby massage, and sensory assessments as well to look at any sensory needs that baby or mum have as well as the psychiatrist doing a sort of medical review and looking at medication options, and psychologists offering nice guideline recommended interventions like CBT and EMDR as well.
Right. So CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, and EMDR, looking at focusing on trauma. Is that right?
Yes. So focusing on trauma and also anxiety, perinatal OCD, and psychosis as well.
Okay. And bringing it back to what you were mentioning earlier around partners and fathers and the impact on mood for them, could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. So with the long-term plan, there is an expansion of perinatal services, and also increasing the time frame from 1 year postpartum to 2 years postnatal in providing services for women with perinatal mental health difficulties. And part of this is to try and look at the needs of partners and dads as well, and to start to offer family interventions. So there are different types of family interventions, and different perinatal services will be, I guess, at this time planning for what kind of family interventions they may want to use. Obviously, I'm a systemic practitioner, so I'm passionate about family therapy, and very passionate about introducing family therapy to involve all family members, and looking at how the narrative around difficulties and diagnosis and power and healing and solutions and strengths within family structures, how that can be used. So it is a different model to CBT, and really I think it is an opportunity with the long-term plan to think about how dads and partners and other family members are supported as well, because with things like birth trauma, sometimes that's that's witnessed or experienced by the partner
Mm.
as well as the mum. And although perinatal mental health services are targeting mum's treatment, it's uncertain about how dads get access or partners get access to help at the moment.
Mm. Have you worked with many partners or dads in your so far?
Have I worked? So I've offered family work as part of an integrated psychological, I guess, intervention plan. So I have offered family sessions. So if I'm working with a woman and I'm offering her CBT, we would contract at the beginning whether some family work would also be helpful, and we would plan together when we might want to do that. So whether it's something that we do as a discrete piece of work at the end, or something that we do, at particular junctures. Because with perinatal mental health, the interventions are can be phased, because there's different phases to a perinatal journey. There's the antenatal, there's a critical period around a birth, and then there's postnatal as well. So sometimes family work can fit around the actual phases that the family might be going through. They might have different focus and priorities at different phases as well.
Okay. Have you found any differences in terms of access to support with male and female? Is there more stigma for certain gender?
I think because our services are primarily targeting mums and women, men are not necessarily coming through, because we're not, doesn't seem that we are at the moment focusing on them. But I think where partners and husbands, or if we're talking about men specifically, where they want to be involved, I think they will come to appointments or be present, or the woman will make that known, and then as a team we try to work and find out about the needs, and there is a pathway being developed for carers assessments as well, so to look at what. So sometimes it could be that the partner could have a care assessment, and as part of that there's a recommendation that the partner has a referral to IAPT, for example, to have some counselling for themselves if that fits for them. But on the whole, I'm not sure that partners and husbands are seen a lot, but that needs to change for the long-term plan. And I think at the moment services are looking at ways of doing that, and they're having they're putting in place different strategies or different work streams to look at how that's going to change when long-term plan funding comes in to all the perinatal services.
Right. So this NHS long-term plan sounds quite promising when it comes to perinatal care. Let's see what unfolds. Dr. Rashad, I'm wondering whether you can tell us a little bit more about self-care and looking after mental health during the perinatal period, especially during this lockdown. Is there any advice that you have?
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. Self-care is really, really important. I think the third lockdown, I think for some people have gone into a sort of drive mode where they are, just working really, really hard at everything, and it's hard for them to take in the full toll of the pandemic. And I think if you're a person like that, I think it's really important that you do take some self-care, have some self-compassion, slow down. If you're a person, for example, on the other side, where you have completely slowed down and maybe you're starting to feel a bit despairing, I would encourage you to maybe try and think about how you can connect more with other people, so that you can receive and give both ways, support. So I think very simple things like having fresh air, where you can going for a walk, simple routines you know. So I think your previous interviews with people around self-care would have covered all these basics, you know, having a
Yeah.
routine in the house and things like that. I think for perinatal, if you're you know, if you're expecting a baby and you're in the pandemic right now, I think it's important that you find somewhere where you can connect. And I think there are some online forums, for example. I think there are some online antenatal groups now, that, you know, forums where they are trying to help people to reach out where they can, and just to have that space. I think also, you know, connecting to friends and family, more. So you know, we're social beings, we need to be around people, and where we can't, you know, things like having more conversations, and just building that in, so that having your, you know, a routine around when you'll have that call with others, and that ability to offload. I think it's important as well to think about the different emotions and feelings. And I think in the perinatal period, especially now, you can feel quite emotional and quite sensitive. And I think being aware of that, being compassionate to yourself, but also if others around you are pressured or busy because everyone's homeschooling right now, schools are closed, thinking about ways that you can do that for yourself, you know, and simple things like having a playlist, you know, of soothing music, or thinking about how you can keep you know, track your mood in a journal, or, you know, trying to rediscover something that you enjoy that doesn't take too much energy out of you. You know, I think it's really important.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
main thing is thinking about understanding when you yourself become you know, overwhelmed, and if you can track your own mood in terms of, today I'm feeling green, or no, today I'm feeling amber, or today, oh, I'm feeling a bit red, so that you can de-escalate any of that yourself. So you can say, oh, I'm feeling amber, maybe I need to do some self-care today, before, you know it, you don't go into your red zone and you haven't looked after yourself and you're very, very overwhelmed. So the really basic, simple things, are really
Yeah.
important now.
And thinking back to myself when I was a new mum, I'm thinking about all of the play groups and the other arenas where we would speak to other mums about kind of sometimes the difficulties around being a new mum and adjusting, and these online forums. And I think we can't stress enough how important it is to talk to other people who are in similar situations. Is that right?
Absolutely, to break that stigma, you're not alone. You're definitely not alone. You know, and there are lots of people who are worrying about the same thing, and struggling, and you know, reaching out, and caring for yourself, and breaking down, you know, any sort of feelings of stigma or shame about this. And I think mums and dads can sometimes be really hard on themselves and have very, very high expectations. You've got to remember, being good enough is good enough. And right now in the pandemic, being good enough just means you know, doing what you can, and that's all we can do right now in the pandemic. Do the best we can, and to be kind to
Absolutely.
ourselves is really important.
Dr. Asha, just to let you know that we are nearing the end of our time in discussing this important topic. So it would be really helpful to hear a little bit about your Jannat Tree project that you've been involved in. And I believe you're writing a chapter for a book. Could you tell us a bit about the project, or the Jannat Tree?
Yeah, sure. So there's a book that's coming out. It's called New Ideas for New Times, a handbook of innovative community and clinical psychologists. And it's edited by Carl Walker, Sally Zlotowicz, and Anna Zoli. And they've asked for contributions on how clinical psychologists or psychologists have tried to work in a community psychology way, and in different ways of doing that. And they want to really showcase examples of work. So the contribution that I'm working on it's called the Jannat Tree, and really it's about a metaphor about healing and spirituality, which was co-produced with British Pakistani women using online forums. And really it just explores different ways of understanding well-being through this spiritual framework, and it connects to, I guess, spiritual ideas of the qalb. Qalb is a word for heart, and I guess it locates emotion and differently to Western notions of cognition and emotion. So it's using a different framework. But I don't want to say too much, because I hope that once the book's out, that people will be inspired to look at the books. It's going to have a range of chapters of lots of different examples of community psychology working, and how to access different ways of working and to access different communities.
It sounds very interesting, and I, for one, will be looking out for that book. Dr. Rashad, did you mention the particular community you carried the Jannah tree, the qalb is around? Sorry.
Yes, it's British Pakistani women. So it's so the work itself was just a very small group of British Pakistani women came together online to form their own framework, really inspired by the idea of the qalb, and using the metaphor of a Jannah tree. Jannah means heavenly, and the tree, I guess, is a life force, and using the ideas of roots and spiritual force going through, and what that represents to them, and in a way how that formulates for them where they are in that framework. So
thank you. So we'll read more about it in the book. We are now coming to the end of the show. It's been very insightful. Thank you for your time, Dr. Rashad, taking time away from your busy schedule and helping us provide this much needed focus and attention to emotional well-being, and in particular perinatal mental health. As mentioned earlier on in the show, you can also catch more mental health information on my Twitter on Atiyah Ali3. You can also listen back to this show and previous shows on Radio Ramadan's YouTube channel. Thank you for listening in today. You will hear from me on the first Saturday of every month, and the next show will be focusing on sports exercise therapy. Thank you. Bye for now.